Sophia Hamblin Wang is one extraordinary human being, taking Australian innovation to the world and working with global industries like steel and cement to view their carbon dioxide emissions as a resource and not just a harmful waste can make a significant impact on emissions and create new global markets. Sophia shares not so much ideas about what we need to be doing, but can reflect on what is actually happening with a passion for driving change. I invite Sophia to the stage, presenting her presentation, Doing Well and Doing Good, turning carbon dioxide into building materials.
So it's a pleasure to be here today and represent women in innovation and women working in climate change technology and also just people in general. I've been living in Canberra for 13 years now, and I definitely call Canberra home. But I'm going to share a little bit about my story and how I got here. And one of the really important parts of that is to mention that I actually come from far north Queensland. So I'm from a tiny fishing village of 800 people, right on the Great Barrier Reef. It's a village called Carbonation Beach, where most of the people fish and farm cane and bananas and just lead a really chilled out lifestyle. So I grew up with my single mother and my auntie living next door, for the most part in a caravan, and then in a situation with an old man as a live-in carer. So I had a very unconventional upbringing where we would always grow our own food, fish for our own fish, and then in our spare time give back to the community. My mum encouraged me to volunteer with the Red Cross and raise money for different charities, and community service was a really important part of everyday life for us, because our ethos was, if you can give, you should. So that's underpinned quite a lot of my life as I came down to Canberra, when I moved to the Big Smoke. Firstly, when I went to high school in Innisfail State High School, I was able to attract a little bit of attention for the community work that I did, and I won an Order of Australia Student Citizenship Award and got to meet Dame Quentin Bryce, who was at the time the Governor of Queensland. It really opened my eyes to trying to solve bigger problems in the world and to expand my horizons outside of my small fishing village and see what other issues I'd like to be working on. So that was in 2005. I moved down to go to the ANU the following year. And that was a really great thing for me. I decided that I wanted to study business and came down to ANU. But what actually happened in May 2006 is my hometown got hit by a Category 5 cyclone, Cyclone Larry. It was a once-in-a-lifetime storm, and my hometown and my high school was devastated by this cyclone. 5 years later, Cyclone Yassi came through in exactly the same path and hit my hometown again. Pretty much all of the houses that didn't blow away in the first cyclone blew away in the second, except for my house, which got flooded from the inside and the roof lifted off, but it didn't actually blow away. We lost our shed. This is my best friend's parents. They lived 2 doors down from me. The top half of their house blew away in Cyclone Larry. And this is my very low resolution photo of Innisfail State High School, which was demolished shortly after this. So my point is that I have had first-hand experience with dealing with climate change and catastrophic weather events. My community was devastated by these storms, and coming from a place that is the Great Barrier Reef, we've heard from Professor Chubb and before about the catastrophic dying of the Great Barrier Reef. I'm from there, I live that experience. So when I was studying business, my really what I decided to dedicate my life's work to is creating businesses that make the world a better place. Richard Thaler, who is a Nobel Prize winner in economics, he put forward something called the nudge theory. He won the Nobel Prize because he said, if you want to get someone to do something, you need to just make it easy. Just make it as easy as possible. And that was really revolutionary thinking in behavioral economics. My life's work just goes one step further, and it says, if you want to make people do something, you just have to make it profitable. And so that brings me to the company that I came out of my PhD to help found, and that company is called MCI, Mineral Carbonation International. Now, we were founded upon a $9.12 million grant in 2013. We got that grant from 3 bodies, from the Department of Industry, Innovation and Science, from the federal government, from the New South Wales Department of Industry, and Orica, which is a mining services company, and a very large company from Australia. What was happening is Orica was capturing 500,000 tonnes of CO2 per annum in their ammonium nitrate factory in Kooragang Island, but there were not enough uses for that CO2 for them to be a good corporate citizen. They were selling 10% of that CO2 off to make plastics and carbonated mineral water, but the rest of it they would just have to vent straight back up the stack pipe. Now, at the time, in 2013, we had an emissions trading scheme in Australia. It was looking like we were going to be on a pathway to creating a lot of good actions within industry towards capturing carbon emissions. But unfortunately, we took a step back from that, and we have been a little bit stagnant in that 6 years. So our company took research from all over the world and looked at the best carbon dioxide utilisation research, and we chose the best places. We went to Columbia University in New York, the University of Sydney, and the University of Newcastle, and we put together an extensive R&D and engineering program in order to show that it is viable to turn CO2 into building materials. So the very first thing that we should always acknowledge is that there is a massive team behind everything we do, and I'm very lucky to work with a team of 22 scientists mostly, chemical engineers, geologists, process engineers, and commercialization experts, which brings together our corporate board. I'm very proud of the work that we've all done, and our team is based in Newcastle mostly, in New South Wales, but also in Singapore and in New York. So, forgive me, but I want to just talk a tiny little bit about chemistry because it's important to know just the fundamental underpinnings of what we do. Okay, so if you want to do something with carbon dioxide, then you have 2 options. You can reduce it into a hydrocarbon and turn it into a fuel, or you can turn it into a carbonate, which is what we're doing. Now, if you turn it into a carbonate, then that's actually an exothermic reaction, which means it's a long-term and safe storage solution for CO2, because if you wanted to reduce it back up to a CO2, then you would have to add energy to it. So, in a way, it's a way of extracting the last useful energy out of carbon. What we do basically is we turn magnesium silicate and CO2 into magnesium carbonate and silica with water. So we need to use a feedstock in order to lock our CO2 away, and what we focus on is serpentinites. There are serpentinite resources all over the world, particularly in Australia, which is very exciting, but also on the east coast of the US and all throughout Asia, including China and India. It's scalable. So the technology that we use, it has the potential to be locking away all of the CO2 that has ever and will ever be emitted by fossil fuels. So it's not the feedstock that would limit the viability of the scalability of what we do. And this is the really important thing. Before I go into what we do, I thought I would mention as well, I'm not going to stand here and convince you about climate change. I'm not going to say climate change is real or it isn't real. I'll leave that up to you to assess the evidence. I would never say that I would never ask someone if they believed in climate change or not, because I think it's up to everybody to assess the evidence for themselves. I personally have dedicated my life's work to addressing climate change. And so I'm just going to move on from all of the things that you've heard so much about emissions and how we need to do things and what's happening with the world. I think we're kind of beyond that now. So this is what we do at MCI. We mine or quarry serpentinite rock, and we can also carbonate, incinerate bottom ash and also industrial wastes like steel slags. So we have a lot of different feedstocks that we could use in the beginning of this process. We then pre-process that ore by grinding, crushing, and thermally activating that rock to 500 degrees Celsius. That changes the chemical structure of the rock and makes it way more reactive. We then pass that through our state-of-the-art carbonation facility in Newcastle in Australia. We've built 3 generations of technology with our $9.12 million grant, and we are producing carbonates every day. This is a photo of our reactor. The 3 generations you can see. On the right-hand side, we have a batch reactor, which proves the concept in batch. We then, at the foreground, we have the semi-continuous reactor, which is the first of its kind in the world. And then next to me, down in the right left-hand side, is a 2-stage reactor, which separates the precipitation and dissolution of our process. Apologies for the science speak, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Yeah, and I'm also in this photo because it's important to have a person in there to assess scale. So off the back of this work, we're able to demonstrate that the techno-economic feasibility of what we're doing, and we attracted another $8.3 million grant in order to incorporate flue gas from industry into what we do. So we're not only making CO2-based products, but also emissions, raw emissions that have NOx and SOx and other nasties inside. So once we pass it through our carbonation reactor with a CO2 supply. One of the really common questions that I get is, where do you get your CO2 from? We are CO2 agnostic, so we will take it from anywhere. There's plenty of CO2 to go around. We'll take it from emitters, from the steel industry, from the cement industry, in the long term, we'll be sucking CO2 out of the atmosphere and we'll be locking it straight back into products. We create 3 main outputs: magnesium carbonate and silica, and metal oxides, primarily iron ore. But interestingly, for every 1 tonne of CO2 that we lock away, we produce 1 tonne of amorphous silica and around 2.5 tonnes of magnesium carbonate. So if we're looking at locking away millions of tonnes of CO2, then we're producing millions of tonnes of products. And that's why we're focusing on cements, pavers, plasterboards, and other silica-rich products that have, that can be produced in bulk, because we need to not exhaust markets. And here we are, we have MCI's building products. So I've got one of our cement bricks here. This represents the future of climate change technology. We are producing these every day, but we're looking for more partners to work with to develop new products. This brick has captured the imagination of a lot of press and a lot of investors, but we have a lot more work to do. We also produce a Nesquinite, a plasterboard replacement, and we're innovating every day and producing new products. Okay, so the potential of our technology. The feedstock is abundant, it is very, it's common and it can be scaled, as I mentioned. Also, at COP22 Marrakesh, there was a study released which estimated the CO2 utilisation technology industry would be worth up to $1.1 trillion by 2030. It was a real starting gun for our technology to show that there is an industry emerging. There aren't that many players in the industry yet, but that is changing. So this is what we do, and this is how much we have made progress. However, we can't really say publicly what we've been researching because it would give away too much to our competitors. We have patented 7 provisional patents in our time working with MCI. And we have more in the pipeline, and we have been working with other partners in order to share as much as we can, but at the end of the day, we need our technology to be commercially viable, and that's why I can stand here and say what we do, but it's not as easy for me to say how we do it. We have had some external validation for what we do. We've been published in the New Scientist magazine, which was a big coup for us. We've also had a number of international events where we've signed public MOUs and big contracts. We've had a public unveiling with large ministers, and we have a number of different champions for our technology within the government and beyond. And last year, we were lucky to win, well, not lucky, we were fortunate to win a International Green Chemistry Award and titled Resource Innovator of the Year, which was based on deep chemistry and the potential of our startup to make an impact in the world. So yeah, we've had a lot of great success so far, but there's still more to do. The work I've been doing really has been telling the world that carbon dioxide is a resource. If you see carbon dioxide and your waste products as a resource, it will bring about change in global industries much faster than waiting for any governments to legislate for companies to do the right thing. So what I realised working for the last 6 years with technologists and with scientists is that a lot of scientists have great ideas, and then they complain when they don't get funding, and they complain when they don't get grants. They say, why doesn't anyone give me money? And I realised it's because a lot of scientists and technologists aren't good at communicating the potential of their technology. They're great at science, but not so great at communication. So I've founded an advocacy group called CO2 Value Australia, along with some colleagues, and we are a collective voice for all carbon dioxide utilisation technologies. Because CO2 can be used to create other materials, not just cements and pavers and plasterboards, but it can be used to create chemicals, and it can be used to create fuels and a lot of other things that might not have even been invented yet. So if we can communicate the potential, hopefully governments will support and stimulate the industry a little bit more than what has been happening so far. What's next for MCI? Okay, so we're raising $30 million US by the end of the year to fund a demonstrator. So we've shown the techno-economic feasibility of what we do at pilot scale. We need to scale it up into a demonstration scale, and that's what we're doing. We're focusing on international funding bodies and also Australian funders. We need materials partners to work on new products. The future is in the products, and so I put the call out to any of you if you are interested, or if you know anybody who's working in innovation in materials, please come speak to me after this. And finally, working more on advocacy and building this global industry of carbon utilisation. Personally, I've been working a lot in this area and also on the ACT Climate Change Council, and I'll be focusing a lot more attention on this for the next 5 years. I'd like to thank you for listening, and please feel free to come and speak to me afterwards.